Well, hello there. I'm Dr. Dan Newsom, and I am so excited to have you here today. This is excellent. I can't wait to share this powerful information that's impacted so many lives over the years. So without any further ado, let's jump right into Module 1. All right. So, what is an autoimmune disease? Well, with your standard definition of an autoimmune disease is that the immune system has gone awry and it is overactive in attacking your body. It's attacking you. Your defense mechanism has turned against you. That's the standard definition, standard view of what an autoimmune disorder is. All right. We have roughly 50 million and climbing, by the way, Americans that have been diagnosed with autoimmune disorders. If you are one of those statistics, I am so sorry. But we have hope. And I hope to give you all this information that will help. It's helped thousands of people, literally, that I've worked with over the years, so I can't wait to get going here. So let's jump right in. So an autoimmune disorder in medicine today is really one of the most misunderstood conditions that doctors deal with. I have a different definition than the standard definition. Okay? Instead of an overactive immune system that's gone awry and turned against you, I define it as an immune system that has lost its ability to differentiate between who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. Okay? It's a little different definition. We're going to dive into this. So let me give you a little story. Okay? Let's say we take two professional heavyweight boxers and we stick them in the ring. And we blindfold one of them. All right? And after the one's blindfolded, we fill the ring with all kinds of other people, right? Then the bell rings, okay? The boxers know, they're trained, once the bell rings, the fight's on, okay? It's time to go, right? So they're out there. One of them is blindfolded though, okay? How is he supposed to differentiate between his buddy, his cornerman, some spectator, the referee, or the other professional boxer? He's blindfolded. He can't tell who's there. All he knows is someone's going to try to attack him, and he needs to defend himself. So what happens? That professional boxer lashes out against whoever he happens to bump into. Okay? This is the state of someone that has an autoimmune disorder. This is what is going on with the immune system. The immune system has lost the ability to tell whether this is my thyroid or this is not my thyroid, or this is my thyroid and this is an invader. The immune system's lost that ability to differentiate. The correction of this is to enable the immune system to differentiate once again. We're going to dive into this deeper. How do I know whether or not I have an autoimmune disorder, right? How do you determine this? Well, for me, when I'm looking at a patient, when we look at lab results, we look at things like antibodies, okay? What are your different antibody levels? Okay, there's all kinds of things that can be tested there, but we look at antibodies. We look at IgA, IgG, those are different proteins in the blood. We'll look at those things. I like to look at the sedimentation rate, or SED rate, okay? Along with that, I like to look at C-reactive protein and homocysteine, okay? Those are all inflammatory markers. We're looking at what level of inflammation's in the body by looking at those things. And then from an immune system standpoint, I like to look at 3 different white blood cells. These are monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils. Okay, but You're not a doctor, right? You're not looking at lab results. How do I at home determine or get an idea, a ballpark idea, whether or not I'm dealing with some autoimmune disorder? Well, there's a couple traits with autoimmune disorders. Autoimmune disorders cause degeneration, okay? So things seem to be falling apart faster than they should be, right? That's one thing. Another thing is they're very cyclic. Okay, so you'll have a cycle where you're really, really bad, whatever the symptoms are, they're really, really, really bad, and then they kind of taper off, and then they're kind of good for a while, and all of a sudden they're really, really bad again. And it's almost no rhyme or reason. You don't really know why they're bad again. Just every so often, bam, they come back and they hit you, and they hit you hard. Okay, that's a trait of an autoimmune disorder. Other things are autoimmune disorders usually cause systemic, or we call it global symptoms, systemic symptoms where, every joint in your body hurts. Okay, every muscle in your body hurts. Your metabolism doesn't work. Okay, your gut is inflamed and just does not work right. Okay, usually it's a system-wide symptom is what you're looking at. Other thing is when you have multiple systems involved at the same time. So like your gut's bothering you, you're having pain in joints or headaches or things like that, and you got a skin disorder or you have something going on with your skin all at the same time. You go to 3 different doctors, they give you 3 different diagnoses. Chances are it's the inflammatory issue of the autoimmune disorder as the underlying cause. Okay, so to kind of give you an idea, these are the different things that would point toward an autoimmune disorder. So the problem with this, the sad thing about this is it's becoming more and more common. Okay. When I first started med school back some years ago, MS was called the old lady's disease. Okay, it was still, this isn't that long ago, it was a long time ago, but not that long ago, it was called the old lady's disease because old ladies were the only ones that got MS. Okay, so it was 50 and older was typically the people that got MS was ladies that were 50 and older. I have had patients that were less than 10 years old with MS. Okay, that is ridiculous. That's not supposed to happen. Okay, so we've had lots of different experiences with lots of different patients. I've treated over 15,000 patients in my career, and a vast majority of them had an autoimmune disorder of some sort. So our next question is, what are your more common autoimmune disorders? Well, these are like MS, multiple sclerosis, lupus, type 1 diabetes, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. We've got inflammatory bowel disease, right? IBS. There's celiacs. There's Guillain-Barré. Okay. Crohn's. Crohn's is another one. Also leaky gut. Okay. All of these things are very common autoimmune conditions. What's interesting though is the ones that are on the rise the fastest are ones like Hashimoto's and diabetes. Okay, these ones directly decapacitate your metabolism. Okay, if the thyroid doesn't work, you have no fire in your metabolism, right? If the pancreas doesn't work, there's no fuel regulator in your metabolism. The other things that are on the rise are things like IBS, Crohn's, leaky gut, The common denominator on all these is the digestive system. Okay, the digestive system is what is massively under attack in our society today. Why are these things on the rise? Why are people, more and more people, dealing with more and more of these conditions? I've had patients. I had a patient actually not too long ago that came and told me that this poor lady had been diagnosed with 54 different autoimmune disorders. Okay, that's the most I've ever seen in one person. But the thing is, they started out 20 years ago. People rarely got these things. 10 years ago, there were quite a few people starting to get these things. Today, it's rampant. It's epidemic. Again, here in the United States, over 50 million people have been diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder. I mean, we only have 320 million people in our country. Okay? This is a massive portion of our society is suffering from one or more autoimmune disorders. So, things we need to take in consideration. Okay, right now, today, there are over 27 million carcinogens in our environment that didn't exist 60 years ago. Okay, let's just take that into consideration. Okay, so there's over 27 million carcinogens that are in our environment today that never existed in our history prior to the last 60 years. One of the things we're going to cover in a future module is how toxins trigger inflammatory responses in our body. Okay, so we're going to touch on that later. But other things that we need to consider is, okay, not only are we bombarded with toxins that never existed in our history, we also have, I call it weaponized food. We have weaponized water. We have weaponized air. Okay, so our food is, common standard American food is designed to be addictive. Okay, it's designed to hook you and make you addicted to it. So you eat more of it. Okay, it's good industry, right? Big industry. Air, okay? If you look at without touching too much on chemtrails, okay? Let's just talk about air traffic, okay? How much air traffic is occurring over us every day? How many airplanes fly over you? They leak fuel, okay? They have exhaust. There's fumes coming off of these things, right? This is bathing us in, we walk and we live and breathe in the air. We're exposed to this every day. If you live in a city, you're around a lot of cars. There's lots of car exhaust, all that kind of air. If you're around industry at all, the air quality is bad, right? So we've got food that's designed to addict us, right, to the food. Food that's devoid of nutrients. Okay, the standard American diet supplies right around 20% of the nutrition a person needs on a daily basis. Okay, so if you're eating the standard American diet, or you have been eating the standard American diet, that means the nuts and bolts that your body burns through on a daily basis, these nutrients that it uses over and over and over again, it's been missing 80% of them for as long as you have been eating the standard American diet. A nutritionally deficient body is a toxin sponge. Okay, I'm going to say it again. A nutritionally deficient body is a toxin sponge, period. Okay, wherever you don't have nutrients, toxins go. Okay, it's just a fact. All right, so we can't really talk toxicity without talking nutrition, and we can't talk nutrition without talking toxicity. Okay, so we've talked about, I view it as if our primary food supply for the masses has been weaponized against us. It's full of pesticides, it's full of herbicides, we've got heavy metals. Okay, high fructose corn syrup is a great source of mercury. Wow, So if you look at all the different things on the shelf at the supermarket, you'll find high fructose corn syrup over and over and over again, right? So if we're getting loaded with all these terrible toxins at every turn, do we think that might be a factor in all of this? Let's talk about GMOs, okay? Genetically modified organisms. Okay, GMOs are not food. Food is something that you can consume and it will sustain life. All right? Genetically modified organisms cannot sustain life for long. Okay? Not only do they not contain all the nutrients that a normal, let's say a potato. I live in Idaho, right? So let's say a normal potato versus a GMO potato. The GMO potato won't even have the nutrients that the normal potato has. Okay? There's some research even that points to GMOs as being what are called anti-nutrients. Okay, where they actually train your digestive tract to not absorb certain nutrients. Okay, that's pretty crazy, right? Let's say you've had multiple infections and you've had to be on multiple antibiotics. What has that done to your system? Okay, let's say you drink standard tap water. Okay, you're loading your system up with 2 antibiotics every time you drink. That's chlorine and fluorine. Okay. Interesting thing, at this point in time, as we're filming this, it wasn't too long ago that Michigan had this terrible issue with lead in their water. What's interesting is that occurred shortly after they raised the amount of fluoride they were putting in their water. And fluoride is a corrosive agent. Okay, it doesn't matter what form it's in. Fluoride is corrosive in and of itself. Okay, when you dump a bunch of fluorinated water through a bunch of lead pipes, it corrodes those lead pipes. Thus, the sudden rise in the lead in the water in Michigan. Okay. Interesting thing of all these different things that we've just discussed is all of them destroy the digestive system. Okay, we're going to tie this in later on, how this destruction of the digestive system is leading people into having these terrible autoimmune disorders. So to kind of wrap this point up, all these different stressors, okay, GMO food, vaccines, all the different heavy metals that we're exposed to, massive pesticides and herbicides, fluorinated water, okay, all of these things hardly existed in the early 20th century, right? Today, all of these stressors are at us on every side. They're all around us. So the stress of modern living today is far higher than it was 50, 60 years ago. Well, let's discuss celiac, okay? I remember when I was a kid, I never had heard of celiac before. I remember it wasn't that long ago, hardly anybody had ever heard of celiac before, right? But all of a sudden, here in the last 10, 15 years, it's exploded. Oh my gosh, everyone has celiac, right? I mean, everywhere you turn, somebody has some sort of celiac issue, or they're gluten intolerant, or they have this or that, whatever. Why is that? I mean, just think about it, okay? Agrarian cultures for thousands of years have been eating wheat. How is it that in one generation, wheat became all of a sudden this poison? How is that possible? Okay, think about it, really. How is that possible? Well, there's a couple things. One, in the last 80 years or so, they've been modifying and crossbreeding and in changing wheat so that when it grows, it has way more gluten than it ever had in the past, okay? By increasing the gluten, they increase the weight of the grains, which they could sell for a higher price, okay? They make more money on it, okay? If you eat the same thing day in, day out, day after day after day, usually within about 90 to 100 days, that particular food that you're eating all day long, every day, becomes an irritant to your digestive system. You know, wheat is very much a staple here in the United States. People have, wheat cereal in the morning, wheat bread at lunch, and wheat pizza at night, right? It's just in everything, right? When they changed wheat and increased the amount of gluten in the wheat, that increased the amount of exposure to gluten we've had as a culture. Typically today, the quantity of gluten in the products that we're consuming would be right around 3 to 4 times higher than it would have been 80 years ago eating the same products. Okay, cereal, bread, pizza, right? And that's all interesting, so they've increased the amount of gluten that we're exposed to because they altered the grains. Okay, so now every time we eat wheat, we're consuming way more gluten than we were ever meant to. Okay. Then here in the last 10 years, there's been this interesting practice, and it's very very, very common today, that they use glyphosate to dry the wheat right before they harvest it. Okay, glyphosate's the patent on glyphosate's a chelator. Okay, so it bonds to and removes minerals and things from the body or the soil. And then number two is it's a patented antibiotic. So when they spray the wheat with glyphosate, it dries the wheat up, makes it easy to harvest, and it kills all the bugs in it. Great, right? No, it's terrible. Because that protein called gluten sucks up all that glyphosate that gets sprayed on the wheat. Okay, then that goes into our food, and if we're eating a antibiotic, mineral chelating substance that's in the food that we're eating 3-4 times a day, we're having multiple servings of wheat throughout the day, how long before that's going to trigger celiac? I mean, think about it. If you're eating an antibiotic 3 to 4 times a day, all right, you're eating a mineral chelator 3 to 4 times a day, I mean, this is going to deplete your body, deplete your microbiome, deplete your gut of any good microbes, okay? How is that not going to lead to celiac? So, given all these different factors, all these different stressors, how long before someone develops celiac? I mean, it's almost inevitable. It's kind of like Russian roulette. And, celiac is just one example of all these different, systemic, cultural and widespread autoimmune diseases that are just everywhere. They're being triggered by our environment. The environment is even triggering alterations in our genetics. Okay, it is so important that we understand how we got here, because if we understand how we got here, we can figure out how to get back where we need to be. Well, here we are, this end of Module 1. So let's recap a bit, all right? So first off, we talked about the standard definition of an autoimmune disease, okay? Your immune system's turned against you, right? That's the standard definition. We talked about how, over 50 million people in the United States have been diagnosed with a autoimmune disease. Okay, so these things are widely misunderstood. Doctors don't really understand them fully. There's all kinds of theories and whatnot, but when we look at what's actually happening, they aren't really well understood by most folks, right? We looked at the symptoms, okay? Systemic, multi-organs, okay? Multiple areas of the body involved, okay? This typically what you're going to see in an autoimmune disorder. You're going to see things, here, things there, the digestive system, the nervous system, the skin, all involved at the same time. That's what you typically are going to be looking at in an autoimmune disorder. We also talked about how there are specific groups of autoimmune diseases that are on the rise. And what's interesting is they all either involve our metabolism or our digestive systems. And then we talked about how all of this is rising at the same rate at which our toxicity in our environment, in our food, our water, our air is increasing. Okay, so as the toxins in our air, the toxins in our water, the toxins in our food increase, the rate of autoimmune disease is also increasing. We also talked about how these things didn't exist, 60 years ago, right? Which is, then we also talked about this, that if we understand how we got here, we can figure out how to get back to where we need to be. So, this is the end of Module 1, and let's go on and let's talk a little bit about Module 2. Okay, Module 2 is probably my favorite, one of my favorite here. We're going to talk about the 3 I's, and I love to talk about the 3 I's. And the 3 I's aren't this thing in your forehead. That's not what I'm talking about. The 3 I's, we'll get into that. It's a big deal. Okay, we'll talk about chronic inflammation, how that drives your immune system into this state where it can't figure out who should I be attacking and who I shouldn't be attacking. Chronic inflammation and how this sets your body up for an autoimmune disorder. So, thank you very much. This is Dr. Newsom, and I will see you in Module 2.